Hey guys, I'm back with another disc commentary. This time I'm going to be going over a plus 20 Halls of Valor that I did earlier this evening. I'll start off as usual with the gear overview. Not a whole lot has changed since last time. I'm still running about 31% haste buffed. I'm still feeling pretty comfortable playing the Rage Feather and keys. Not really seeing a need for a second healing trinket at this time. Pretty much just got some small incremental upgrades. And talents, I've been using this build in higher tyrannical keys. I think that the schism duration and scov are probably necessary for the higher tyrannical keys because you just need to have that longer period where you can do a lot of burst atonement healing, and the combination of the long schism and shadow covenant lets you pump out a lot of atonement healing pretty quickly, as you'll see in a little bit. I ditched Wheel and Woe. I don't feel like I was getting a whole lot of benefit out of it. Mostly because the Smite generally was chewing up my Wheel and Woe proc, because I, just would absent-mindedly smite after penance, and, 12% times 7 damage on smite is not really saving anything. And honestly, nor is a larger power word shield generally. Sometimes it's nice on the tank, but I wasn't making very good use of it, and I honestly don't think it's a very strong talent overall. And I was getting better, more consistent healing out of getting the schism duration. So we'll move into the run. Alright, so we're starting off strong. I forgot to start recording the key before it started, so we're coming back from kind of a partial wipe to the big 3 pull at the start here. So we pick up, I'm running back here. We had a bit of a thundering mishap on our initial attempt at this pull. This Drake, I think, actually slays my tank here. Yep, right there. I probably could have saved him with Barrier. I probably could have hit him with Rapture. I just really wasn't paying attention. Pack's mostly dead. This pack is pretty tough. There's a lot going on, but as long as your melee are kicking the Thundercallers, which are now dead at this point, it tends to go pretty well. We managed to pull out of the tailspin here. This kind of stuff will happen a lot, when everything doesn't go as planned, and it's all about how you recover from it. If you instantly just call everything a wipe, you're gonna have a hard time. So you gotta figure out how to make up time on pulls like that. We move into Hymdall. This boss is not particularly difficult. There's not a ton of damage going out that is followed up by other damage, if that makes sense. So Disc is pretty strong here. Most of the damage on this fight is avoidable. And, you bait the Dancing Blades out and you Atonement heal off the Horn of Valor. You can spend cooldowns on Horn of Valor if you feel the need to, but on a 20 Tyrannical right now, it's not even close to one-shotting, so it's just follow it up by a Radiance, hit a Schism into, Twilight Equilibrium Weaving combo, and it should be plenty of Atonement healing. You can kind of see the strength of Shadow Covenant there. I get everybody healed up pretty quickly because I have that extra Shadow damage going on. So we just watch the side every Horn of Valor. You move into the first area that is turned into lightning, you dodge Dancing Blades, and keep the tank alive through the Bloodletting Sweeps is really all that needs to happen here. Thankfully, our prop paladin is pretty self-sufficient. I don't need to spend a ton of resources just spam healing him. We move through this boss pretty uneventfully here. I spend most of my time DPSing. You don't really need to do a lot of spot healing. Just kind of, I'm rapturing there to just spread atonement, honestly, and lower the incoming damage of that Horn of Valor. You could go this whole fight without pressing Rapture or Barrier, honestly. You just need one Radiance and atonement healing afterwards, as long as nobody's making mistakes. And once again, we have the Venerable Jetlock, who keeps his Burning Rush on for the entire dungeon, padding my overall healing a little bit. This gets a little spicy here, trying to run in and clear. I realize that it is cleared, with all those tornadoes around the Dancing Blades. They're a little scary. Here, I kind of make a mistake by staying too close to the melee. I forget that it doesn't actually always bait on the ranged DPS. It can go on the healer as well. And you see our poor Demon Hunter pays the price for my poor positioning here. I get a Dancing Blade baited into melee as he is doing Demon Hunter things and eats one to the face. We opt to save the B-res here because the boss dies at 10%. He's almost down. Just want to remember, you watch your timers, make sure if a Dancing Blade is coming up, you're not near the melee and the tanks. There's plenty of room on this fight usually. And we move up the stairs here. I throw a Mind Soothe on this Sentinel every time I see him. You don't always need to, but you can actually pull this pack from, well, he's pretty close if you do Mind Soothe him. This isn't a particularly bad pull. It just requires your melee to pay attention to frontals, have good kicks on the Mystics. You really only need to kick the Holy Radiance. The Rune of Healing doesn't do much. You just pull the mobs out of it. And it's just kind of cycling, healing on the tank. He does take a decent amount of damage from these power attacks, so you'll see me do a lot of direct healing on him here. Especially once they're raging, he will start taking a lot of damage. Here I throw him a barrier, as we got 3 raging ones, and we've got not a great soothe with just a rogue, and I think Assassination also wants to be shivving on cooldown for damage, so sometimes it's not up when we need it. He does try to reserve it for when the mobs are low, but you know, stuff happens. We go into the corner here and drink, so we're out of LOS as the left and right sides get pulled. All this trash is pretty much the same. You kick 2 or 3 mobs. Let me see what happened there. I think our Demon Hunter actually looks like he might have pulled aggro there at the same time he had the lightning circle on him. Unfortunate. You gotta wait a second sometimes. Here we have Holy Radiance go off because we're missing one of our kicks. We had kicks available. Unfortunately, as a priest, the only real interrupt you have is fear. I was not close enough at that time to interrupt that. I think if I was playing a little more aware, I could have gotten in range to fear. There we get a nice coil on a Holy Radiance from Jet. Here I'm just watching my tank as he accumulates stacks of that breach armor. He's going to need more and more healing as those go out. There is a decent amount of group damage from the Thundercallers. You can't stop everything, and this Thunder Strike is not kickable, it's not interruptible at all, and it just is instant cast and goes on somebody, so it's just something you'll have to heal through. Just make sure you're spread and you don't put it on anybody else, and you dispel the dot portion after it goes off. We move up into the dining room here. And I think our plan here is to do just the Sentinel and the Shield Maiden, who you can see is down the hall at this time. I'm just drinking as they're only fighting Sentinel. Sentinel's a pretty easy mob. As a ranged healer, you just don't be in melee. Here I Mind Soothe the mobs behind us just to make sure nobody backs up into them. Mind Soothe is pretty powerful in this hallway. It gives you a lot more space when you're able to Mind Soothe and lower that aggro range on all these extra packs that you don't necessarily want. You do want to be purging that shield, the protective light, whenever the Sentinel casts that, because it's a decent chunk of absorb. You will notice that I have switched to Halo. I've been using it in Raid, and I honestly just like it better than Divine Star. It requires less of the positional element of like running in and making sure it swipes mobs both on the way in and the way out, and having to aim it, which sure it isn't that hard, but Halo is a strong healing button on a longer cooldown that I just kind of prefer. I think that personal preference is a perfectly legitimate claim to use that ability over Divine Star, although it might be a slight damage loss. Here we're just keeping the group up through this, this unavoidable damage that's coming out with the Thunder Strikes. watching our tank for too many stacks of Mortal Hue and Breach Armor. Here I run in and fear that Breach Armor. Decent amount of single target tank healing has to be done this week because of the Raging. Unless you've got some Giga Soothe group that's just, you know, like a Devastation Evoker or a Preservation Evoker can do their AoE Soothe pretty much every pack. This is very powerful. In this pack, you just kind of want to watch out for frontals, and when this Valkyra's advances on you, you generally are going to want to hit Fade and Power Word Shield yourself. Because it does hit pretty hard. And then just watch the frontal afterward. You can actually LOS it. You can go down the stairs or, you know, around one of these little corners, and she'll attempt to recast it on the other ranged, if there is one, or you once you're back in LOS. If you're the only ranged, you can kind of dance around with her, and she'll never cast it and stay in melee. But with two ranged, it's kind of just too much of a pain to coordinate, having two people dip in and out of line, alternating to get a little bit of melee uptime. But if you are the only ranged, you can do that. Soulstone here can be a little tough on Fortified, as the Eye of the Storm is the same as the boss mechanic, where it does a lot of damage over, you know, a pretty long period here, like 10 seconds. Here I start with a Rapture, and I probably could have committed a little more here, but I go Rapture, Shadow Covenant Schism, and alternate TE and use the Shadow Halo, which is a solid amount of healing and damage. And then for this next one, I think I just go with the good old double Radiance. We go Radiance and then Self-Penance. And I think I just go straight Atonement Healing on that one. Alright, I probably should have done double Radiance there. There was no reason to hold the second charge. And then Olmir the Enlightened is fairly easy as ranged. You just don't get hit by Sanctify Bolts, and you hope your melee kick Searing Light for you, which isn't going to kill you, but you don't want to be taking more damage than you need to. Fairly simple here. One thing for Sanctify is make sure your particle effects are turned all the way up in your graphic settings. An Inky Black Potion here, I use that right there, helps to see it better. Sometimes I forget I have those. So Hyrja will just basically do the mechanics of those two guys. The important thing to do on this boss is just make sure you're rotating cooldowns on Eye of the Storm and not overcommitting. So here I go with just Rapture and move into straight Atonement Healing, Scov, Schism, Penance, Halo, Mind Games. I probably should have been alternating TE there by weaving Smites in between, but, you know, we're not all perfect. And just want to top the group off, as the little bolts that she does will do a decent amount of damage. So after Eye of the Storm, you want to probably do a decent amount more Atonement Healing to top the group before somebody just gets randomly one-tapped. I suggested doing 2 Sanctify phases, and nobody was having it with 2 melee. They wanted their uptime, which I think on a higher key I probably would have insisted, because Eye of the Storm does get to be a lot. You know, I kind of run out of CDs on the next one here. So we go with Barrier. Unfortunately, we did not have Darkness up. I really wish we had. And our Rogue dies because I misplay here. I probably should have sent Shadow Fiend as well as Barrier there, just for that little extra bit of healing he does. I also think I probably just needed to send both Radiance charges on every Eye of the Storm. I'm not really sure what I was holding those for. So there I wasn't worried about the tank. I think he let himself proc his Ardent Defender there. This Eye of the Storm, I go with Rapture Fiend. And probably should have moved into Atonement Healing earlier. I go Skov, Schism, Smite, Halo. No, Mind Games. Should have pressed Halo earlier. I get locked out of Halo because Skov ends. And if you're casting the Shadow Halo, when Skov ends, your cast gets canceled and it gets switched back to the Holy Halo, which is kind of unfortunate. I probably should have pressed Halo about 2 GCDs earlier there instead of Mind Games. This is the only really time Sanctify can get dicey is if you're having to clear during it. But otherwise, it's a fairly easy mechanic. You just kind of hang out, top people off when they get rando lightning bolted. Here I'm pretty dry on cooldowns. I advise the group to press personals. Go with the good old double radiance Skov Halo. Or not. Need to press Halo. Definitely. Click off the Inky Black Potion because it's ugly. Very important. Grab a new Hellstone. Definitely need to be pressing more Fade. I am bad about that. Fade's kind of a crappy DR, but it helps to press it just so you're not dipping as low during some of those mechanics, like Eye of the Storm. Probably could have played that a little better. And we move into more dining room trash. This is all pretty uneventful. On Tyrannical Week, none of this trash is super dangerous, especially if you're getting good interrupts on it. Another Mind Soothes just to prevent any kind of butt pull here. Quick drink in. Send PI on the lock for his nether portal. And this pack pretty much melts. We probably could have combined this with the pack across the hall here. Save a little time since we had all cooldowns rolling. DH could have pressed meta here too, I think. Yeah, I think if we had doubled this up, that probably would have been a good time save. Because there's only the one kick in here, and I think one kick in the other one. Like, Etch is... Yes, we probably could have changed this earlier. Because Etch hurts, but not to the extent that it needs to be kicked every single time. You know, you can just throw Fear on it, or Hodge, or, any number of single target AoE stops. This probably would have been a good pack to send Barrier on. Just help the tank out a little bit. And it's off cooldown. Probably could have done a little more damage here if I had pressed Skov. My mana's pretty healthy. I'm a little conservative about pressing Shadow Covenant because it is so expensive. And I really don't like having a lag behind the group to drink. Unfortunately, we don't have a mana increasing or mana regening seasonal fix. But we do get a good drink in here. We're pulling the Drake and I think 2 Bulls, which is a pull that I don't love. But it gave us count. Jet goes and pulls his Bulls. And yeah, this Rumbling Stomp is pretty anti-melee, so our DH and our Rogue don't have a great time this pull. The Drake's pretty simple. You just see that Crackling Storm is on you and don't be in the swirly when it lands. There is actually tech to get count here by dragging the Stag into the Drake, which is what we tried to do there, but we accidentally killed the Drake too fast before he ate the Stag. So we have to kill the Stag on our own. Again, should probably have pressed Skov here earlier just for the damage. Kind of sitting on a lot of things here that I don't need to be sitting on. I don't really know how Jet died or why, but he did die. Presumably some ability from the Bull. And we move down, we skip all this trash, and we go into Fenryr. Fenryr is a boss on Tyrannical that can either be an absolute nightmare or kind of a cakewalk, depending on his spell queuing. He has what appears to be complete RNG spell queuing and is made considerably easier by having a rogue, a night elf, a hunter, or a mage in your party, so that they can do what Oxy does here on this Ravenous Sleep, where he's the furthest target and vanishes. So I kind of waste my Rapture, but I do get some value out of it because he does do a Claw Frenzy here that we take not a whole lot of damage from. And we just move into standard Atonement Healing, Schism, Penance, Mind Games, Shadow Halo, which gets cancelled because my Skov ends. I need to play that better. You just gotta watch, make sure you're not casting during the Unnerving Howl. Claw Frenzy will hit you pretty hard. I usually go with a Radiance into a Schism combo there. I hit my Desperate Prayer because the leap is on me. Schism, probably should hit Skov here. Do we hit Skov here? There we hit Skov, finally. Probably could have sent Fiend. Boss is pretty low, so Fiend is probably a good save. And of course he hits us with one more Claw Frenzy on his way out, because he's such a nice guy. Here we move into Fenrir's Trash. We're trying to pull as few wolves as possible, I believe, because the wolves are pretty miserable. You can't pull enough of them at a time to make them efficient, because they buff each other by being pulled together. So we just run through the middle here with a sap and an imprison, and move on into Fenryr Phase 2. There we don't have Vanish up, so I was expecting another cancel on that Ravenous Leap, so I fall behind here a little bit. So you see we have 3 people with bleeds, and our Demon Hunter got 2 stacks, which makes him a little rough to heal for the rest of this fight. We bop the first Send a Blood target for uptime, send Lust, send PI. I think I pressed it on Oxy there because he was in cooldowns and Jets were over. That's Claw Frenzy, I fall behind a little bit. I probably should have sent an Defensive Penance on Mayo, where I do. And do cancel that Ravenous Sleep, which is very nice. I think if we had not been able to cancel that one, I probably would have fallen pretty far behind here. Good barrier for the Claw Frenzy. I think Mayo needs a little more attention than I'm giving him right now. I should probably be single target healing his 2 bleeds a little more, but we do keep him alive. Here I'm spreading atonements with Renews because I need to get back out of the cave. I don't really have time to plant and cast a Rapture or a Radiance right then. PS myself. Mayo dies to Claw Frenzy. I should have called for Darkness, I think, earlier so that I didn't fall as far behind on his HP. He also did have Blur available. I don't know what his health pot and health stone looked like. Here things start to get a little spicy. Once you get these 2 and 3 stacks of bleeds out, like the boss needs to die, or you're just going to run out of stuff. I do have Rapture coming back up, but once you get that late into that fight, those bleeds are ticking hard enough and on a high enough key level that they're just going to shred your shields off with a single tick. So that boss is kind of a DPS race. And we move into the bears. I do like to pull the bears because you've got this double speed buff. The tank is really not in any danger here unless he plays greedy, which we're doing a little bit of here. But this is a nice juicer AoE pad pack. If I had more mana, I think I would probably be sitting in and spamming Holy Nova actually, because this pack is really not very dangerous. Just every time a cast bar comes up, the tank just needs to kite. Here we're moving into a little Holy Nova spam as the pack is dying. We hit our Nightborn Racial to put a nice AoE slow on everything. It's kind of a bad race, but I like the way it looks, and occasionally that AoE slow is useful. It's not something that Priest otherwise has access to. We move back up into our fully cleared dining room here. And we have been avoiding the double sentinels because they're honestly just miserable. Especially with double melee, you end up spending so much time out and not hitting them. They take forever, they've got a ton of HP, not fun trash. So we're getting our count elsewhere so that we're 84% by the time we go up here. Each of these mini-bosses is 4%. We are doing the beer tech, which I will explain as we get up here. You want to grab one of the little mugs off of the table. So what our lock does is he throws the beer with his extra action button at one of the bosses we're not pulling. And we activate the far left boss, Ranulf. And so you pull him over to the guy that you threw the beer at, and he turns orange. Then once he stops being orange and punching, you see his King Haldor's nameplate comes back. They're now all interactable, and you can go one by one and interact with them as if you had not interacted with any of them. So you can just kind of kill one, drag the other one to the next guy, and activate them in sequence, as opposed to fighting them 2 at a time or 1 at a time. This saves a good amount of time in Halls of Valor. I think if we had not done this on this run, we probably wouldn't have timed. You can pretty freely send cooldowns on these guys early. Skovald has pretty long RP, and he's not a really dangerous boss, so anything you can do to get some more damage out, and you don't need to conserve mana here at all. I probably should be pressing Skov a little earlier. These guys really just aren't very dangerous. Sometimes that dagger throw will hurt a lot on Fortified, but on Tyrannical, it's half health, and then there's no more damage, as long as you're kicking the unruly yell. You always want to do Tor last, I think. It can get a little overwhelming with those ads. They do kind of walk at like the speed of smell, so you can just kite them forever, but you do lose damage uptime. You lose time off the key by having to just walk around with them forever. So just a little bit of Atonement spot healing here. The dagger is a healing debuff, but there is no other damage. So you just slowly, you toss an Atonement on whoever got hit, and they'll get healed up to full. There's possibly a use case for Shackle Undead in here if you have no other possible CC for these ads. But there's a lot of classes that will take CC that is necessary for their kits. I don't think I've ever come in here and we've had, wiped or anything, or had this guy healed to full because I didn't have Shackle. Between the Rogue, the Demon Hunter, the Paladin, we've got enough stops, enough slows, full duration CCs that we can just kind of ignore that guy. And now we move into God King Skovald. I don't think this boss is particularly challenging, even on Tyrannical. You can fall behind a little bit on fix sets like Grievous, but Grievous is just a rough time in general. So you sit here and you wait out his infinite RP and shoot the shit in voice chat for a bit.
Maybe I see a dagger finally?
Another horn with Leech?
Leech!
Here you see me skillfully use a summoned pot from my bags that I had from Raid left over because I didn't have them on my bars. So I'm just going for pure damage here. I'm not concerned about mana. This fight isn't really long enough that mana becomes an issue. Full send big DPS opener because nothing is happening here. You love to see when his charge is on the tank because it deals the Fellblaze Rush deals really little damage to the tank. There, unfortunately, we all eat it as he can't move, and I think nobody realized it was on him until a little too late. So I get into a little bit of panic mode healing here. I have to send a Power Word Life on myself. I miss my Power Word Life, actually. That's weird. But I go with a Defensive Penance on myself. A good Atonement Burst healing will pull the group out of that. Here I'm dotting up the ads. Maybe not really necessary. Those ads are nice if you're behind a little bit on healing. When they're low, you just throw a Purge the Wicked on them and hit them with a Shadow Word Death, and that's a solid amount of group healing. But otherwise, you're just healing off the Fellblaze Rush on people. It does sometimes require a little bit more than just Atonement healing. It's not a bad idea to just go for the Defensive Penance on them. But you sit in the Ragnarok, you take no damage. Make sure you're not cleaving people with Fellblaze Rush, like we do have happen again. Everybody's a little tired from Raid, so we're not all playing super great. But Atonement healing is plenty enough to heal that off. It's not super dangerous to have on everybody. Especially with the long Schism and Shadow Covenant, you really just do a lot of healing in your main burst. So here you see me, I do have that Fragment of Woe targeted, and I hit him with a nice Shadow Word Death, and it basically tops the tank off. So their benefit is twofold. It pads your overall with big Shadow Word Death damage, and also is good healing. So there, when the rush was on me, all that really takes is, you run out, you fade, Power Word Shield yourself, and if you need to, send a Flash Heal proc on yourself, or just kind of Atonement heal it off. If you get really far behind, you go with a Defensive Penance, who we got a lot of bad floor under him. So our melee is kind of bathing in fire here, which is healable damage. You don't want to be in there forever, but overall, God King Skovald, fairly easy boss. So here we're looking at our timer, and we're concerned about timing. The Odyn RP is a solid 30 seconds off our timer, so we're talking about when do we need to be pressing cooldowns, or where are we going to lust the first runes or go on pull, and I think everyone decides that we're going to go on runes because we got some cooldown remaining on everybody's major offensive abilities. I do go with another skillfully bag opening Potion of Ultimate Power from Raid. And we pull him into this corner. It does get you some nice spear drops that are all kind of in one spot. Here they all do kind of want to spawn right on top of us. But when the spears come out, they'll do an AoE and shoot out the balls. Don't get hit by the balls, they stun you. But generally just follow up every spear with a Radiance. Here I even get hit by a stun ball, which is really unfortunate, but not lethal. Run out, dot the ad up, put a little damage into it. And we prepare for our Runic Brand coming up in 6 seconds. We get a spear, hit him with a Radiance, and Shatter Spears is just going to fill the arena with balls, so you don't want to be super hard casting here. I do pre-rapture the first Runic Brand always. It gives everybody just that little bit of buffer health they need to find their rune and get to it. I think maybe there's a case to be made for saving it till the second one, because the first one there's very few spears up in the middle of the room with the way we do this. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of use for Barrier on this fight. I suppose you could probably use it as just to mitigate one of the hits from the spears spawning, because they do start to hit pretty hard here. You can see they're hitting us about half our HP. Cranking damage into the ad. Our tank stays in with Bubble just for uptime. He's still in that little angel form, doing as much damage as he can. We're now really looking at that timer. Thankfully, I think I probably would have died there without sack. I should be watching my health more. Probably hit a Desperate Prayer or a health pot. Here, I advise everyone to hit a health pot. Our rogue hits a ball. Cannot be saved by the Defensive Penance. We do get him up and just go full damage on the boss here. I'm looking at the timer and see 20 seconds. And I just send all damage, no healing. Smite only. Could have gone with a Mind Blast there. But we do kill it, and then my game freezes as the two spears spawn on top of me. We all get achievements for timing our 20. And that's Halls of Valor, with 8 seconds to spare. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know down in the comments what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see more of. And I'll try to get another VOD out again this week, and we'll see you in the next one.